Hello, today I'm going to be reviewing this TikTok trend of the Dollar Tree skull candle using only Dollar Tree items. I'm going to walk you through my process and let you know what I would change if I were to do it again and discuss whether I would do it again or not. Let's get started. Okay, so out of the gate, I think I was doomed because I could not find the soft plastic skull that everyone else was using, and instead I had to use this drinking container, which you'll see has a convex bottom and doesn't really balance very well. Plus the plastic is really hard, and I think that hindered me a little bit. So I'm also using 3 of these altar candles. I didn't think that I would need 3, but in the end I did end up using that many. First things first, I was going to remove the mouth of the container and cut all the way along the side to make this into a 2-piece mold. But don't forget, we have to fix that convex bottom. So I'm going to use my heat gun and push that in a little bit later. I'm just going to take my Dremel here and cut the top off. Be careful because it is plastic and it does heat up, so don't touch it until it's had time to cool. When it cools, it's left with this crusty, hard plastic. You can try sanding it. I didn't have much luck with it. I ended up kind of picking it off with a razor. You'll see me kind of getting under it and using my thumb. That worked the best. This doesn't really affect the outcome of your project. It just removes the sharp pieces so you don't hurt yourself. So next we're going to use our heat gun and heat up the bottom button that's sticking out and just try to press it back in. I use the bottom of my utility knife to do so because it is hot. Just be really careful that you don't burn yourself when you're trying to depress that. And actually, hopefully you find a mold that doesn't have this issue. I'm just trying to work with what I had because I think the shelves were just really picked over by the time I got to the store. Ultimately, you'll see here, I didn't even get it to a point where it was like really balanced, which was very frustrating, but I just decided to keep going and work with what I had. So you'll see here I'm using my utility knife to go around the side. I thought I could cut through it with the knife, but like I said, it's just too hard. So I'm just kind of scoring it now, and then I will eventually end up using my Dremel to cut through, but it does leave a significant gap. So if I were to do this again, I would not use this mold. I would definitely be looking for the softer mold that can be cut with the utility knife so it doesn't leave the gap, which you'll see pretty soon here coming up. So at this point, I'm basically like, okay, I'm over it. Just grab the tools that are going to make it happen. But again, you'll see, look at that gap. And then that led to another issue, which we'll move on and see in a little bit later here. But this did finally cut through and I ended up with 2 pieces, but then I had to figure out a way to seal that up so that when I poured the wax in, it wouldn't be melting everywhere. So here's the last part. And just trying to pull it together, pull it apart. And I swear this project fought me every step of the way, and I can't even tell you how many times I wanted to stop. But I was going to do it for the blog. I wanted to do it for y'all just to show you what crafting is like. It is not always a beautifully finished project, and sometimes it's a headache like this. So here's that final little piece that was keeping it together. Now we've got the 2 pieces. But you'll see kind of when we line it up, it's not a great match. It's like really frustrating that I spent all that time and now I have this massive gap. But I thought, oh, well, I can keep going and I can make this work. So I decided to just kind of tape it in place to start with, and then I thought I would use some hot glue to fill the holes. Now, I get it. Hot glue is going to melt with the wax, but I also put duct tape over the top of that, and I thought, oh, surely this will keep the wax in. That's funny. So you'll just see that I'm going around and I'm filling up with like a ton of glue. I'm filling in the holes and like going around the sides, just going overboard. And I also, my thought process here was in the end, I'll be able to like pick it off. It should be no problem. And you'll see how that went. So here I'm just going to tape over the top of that, and I'm just sealing on the sides really tightly, pushing it down onto the plastic. So you go all the way around, make sure all of the seams are like pinched tight, and then you're ready to melt your wax. So go ahead and drop your candles into some simmering water. I had a wash rag at the bottom of this, and then I ended up taking it out because it didn't feel stable. I was hesitant to put them right on the bottom of the pot directly, but it didn't end up being a problem. So I needed to fish out the wick from these, so I'm pouring it into a container before I pour it into the mold. But you'll see, like, look at how much these shrink down. And this is why I ended up using 3 different candles as opposed to 2, because by the time the wax melted, it was basically half the size of that container, which is frustrating. Plus, I find that the melting point of this wax is very low. And so look at that. And so I hated the texture of this candle in the end. Anyways, here I am pouring it into a jar because I'm trying to fish out that first wick, and then we're going to use that wick for our candle. So I'm just using skewers as a tool here several times throughout the process, fishing it out and then wiping off the bottom so that I can put a dollop of hot glue and affix it to the bottom of the candle. So I just put that wax back into the water to keep it warm. Probably wasn't necessary, but I did it anyway. And here you'll see I'm putting the hot glue in, and I'm going to use that same skewer to help push it down to the bottom. You want to try and keep it centered. And then you're going to need to center it at the top. You can use a clothespin. I didn't have any, so I broke a skewer in half and kind of pinched the wick between it and balanced it on the top. You'll see here coming up in just a second, but that's right in the middle where I wanted it. And here we go. It's pinched and secured. So then also here I figured out, well, you know what? It's going to actually be really hard to pour out of this jar. So I'm going to pour this into something that actually has a spout. So I got my Pyrex measuring cup here, transferred that hot wax with a pot holder because it is very hot, and then poured that into the mold that way. So you'll notice here when I'm pouring the wax into the mold that I do not pour it all at one time. My reasoning for this is that I thought that there could be bubbles that would get stuck in the crevices of the facial features of the skull. And so I'm just going to pour, I don't know, like a third of this first, and then I'm going to kind of tip him forward, and I use a spoon to hit the facial features, hit the front, like right here, you'll see, just in case there are any bubbles trapped in there. That would hopefully bring them up to the top, and then I'm going to refill the rest. I also realized that I don't have enough wax with the 2 candles, and so I have to heat up the 3rd candle and finish pouring it. But by the end of this, I was like, oh wow, this might actually work. So I let it sit and cool, and I want to say it was probably a couple hours, and then I came back to this. So all of that work I had done trying to seal it up didn't even work. It was completely futile. But at this point, if I was not doing this for YouTube and my blog, I probably would have chucked this project, to be honest with you. But I was determined to make it work, so took that little piece, melted it down, and poured it back into the skeleton, head, skull, whatever. And so then I let this sit overnight, and I came back the next day and decided it was the time to try and demold it. So obviously just start by taking off all of the tape. And here's where I was even more annoyed. Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. Again, this wax has a super low melting temperature. And like when you touch it, it starts to melt with the temperature of your body heat. And so as I'm peeling this, I'm getting like the glue that's been hot from the mold, and the wax is melting all over my hands, and it's just uncomfortable and gross. And I'm already like so ready to be done with this thing. But like I said, I'm determined to finish, so I keep chugging, but I can't even tell you how many paper towels I use trying to clean this area up and wipe my hands off like throughout the entire process. So I'm just coming through here trying to peel that off. It doesn't really work because everything's slimy and waxy. And in the end, I ended up just cutting through, just like through the middle of it with the point of the knife. And I think I show that part coming up because, again, I thought I would just be able to pop this off. Didn't work that way at all. Yeah, so here it is. So I'm struggling with it. This took a lot longer than I feel like it should have. I was mumbling things under my breath, but I was like, I'm so close to the finish line. Like, I've got this far. And then by the end I was just like, oh, just come out of the thing. And you'll see that I probably forced it too early, and a little bit of his like nasal area came off inside the mold. Ultimately, I don't think it looks awful. You'll see how unbalanced it is because of the way that it was sitting on the bottom, which is frustrating. And here I'm pointing out, where it got scratched up, but I'm trying to smooth it out with my hands and it actually kind of works. But in the end, I just set it down and I used my heat gun to run some heat over it and smooth out all of those areas. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. But I don't think I would ever do this project again with these materials. So if I were to do this project again, I would be using a harder wax. I saw someone else using emergency candles. I don't know that my Dollar Tree has emergency candles, but I feel like that would be a way better option. Do not use these altar candles. They are awful. Total crap. Like, they're probably like paraffin wax. I don't even know. And you don't even get as much as you think you're getting. So it's just annoying. I would also try to find the softer plastic mold. Don't resort to something that is off brand or whatever, that is not from the original tutorial. Don't try to go off and do your own thing because it's a lot more pain in the ass than it's worth. So here it is in its final glory. I do not feel comfortable lighting this and leaving it in a room. Like, I would probably have to balance it in a bowl or something. It did tip over when it was lit. It's not safe, but I mean, it looks okay for photos. But let me know if you try this and if you had a better go than I did.